For those of you who have agreed to be sadomasochists and sit in on this process for the time, I applaud your courage, and I will pray that by the time we're done, that it will be useful. It will be successful if the material that I share with you first is Spirit-led, if you receive it, but more importantly, if you give it away to somebody else. If that happens, we succeeded. If it doesn't happen, then I suppose we can both put binders in our offices and say we went through a process that ultimately was pretty meaningless. I'm going to answer the questions on the sheet that I sent, introduction and suppositions, before we start working through the 4 sessions that we're going to cover this morning, God willing. Because I want you to know at least where I'm coming from, and you can evaluate, be good Bereans, go to Acts 17:11, and you can decide whether or not you think this is from the Lord's direction or just the food I ate last night, I suppose. But let's get started. I have number 1, if you've got your list, why should Christian individuals or churches, congregations care about the subject of discipleship? I'm going to read what I wrote on the back of the little booklet that all 4 of these lessons come out of. Most of you know, I'm not saying this to sell them. I sell lots of discipleship books. That's not the point. But over the years, I put together a series of about 50 or 60 discipleship lessons that I believe are essential. And the first little booklet I called was Essentials. The second one, Apologetics. The third one, Leadership. But on the back of each booklet, I wrote the same thing. Christians are called by God to be salt and light in a world that is decaying morally, ethically, and materially, and wandering aimlessly in spiritual darkness and religious fog. We have been given the specific responsibility of making disciples as we proclaim the gospel, actively serving as ambassadors for Christ. It is, however, not possible to share what we do not know or give what we do not have. There is a direct correlation between the time we spend in discipleship training and our ability to communicate effectively with others. People all around us are swimming in a sea of moral and ethical relativism. They need help. But few people are willing or able to throw out lifelines. As those entrusted with the message of eternal life through Jesus Christ, we must be capable and willing to share more than confusion with those asking questions and seeking answers concerning our hope. This requires a clear understanding of our faith and the ability and willingness to pass on what we have learned. Too much fill-in-the-blank Bible study materials consistently collect dust on the top of shelves as it sits lined up neatly in full binders complete with certificates of class completion. In reality, these notes are little more than a testimony of sincere intentions that will never be realized. It is never comfortable to feel trapped in theoretical fog. The fuzzy thinking is especially tragic when the message concerns a person's eternal destiny or reward. All Christians have a responsibility to ensure that the transferable truth principle of 2 Timothy 2:2 is actually occurring daily and not just being memorized or discussed. As ambassadors for Christ, our goal for living is neither comfort nor convenience, but rather to be trained instruments in God's hand to help populate heaven and depopulate hell. The Christian life was never intended to be lived in isolation or as a spectator sport. We've been called to serve as faithful stewards, not pampered aristocrats who expect others to serve us. The materials in transferable cross-training, books 1, 2, and 3, have been field-tested. Pragmatically speaking, they work. The focus on each lesson is its simple transferability. Our desire, or I should say probably my desire, is for those who accept the challenge of discipleship that it is with or without a Bible and notes in hand. Each individual who has taken the time to master concepts and principles in this series will have confidence to comfortably and biblically respond to common questions and comments from friends or enemies of Christ. By God's grace, we can make a difference in eternity by being actively involved in the most important job assignment ever entrusted to mankind. I believe that. I believe we have the most important job and the most important message. The message we have counts for eternity. There's a lot of things that are shared, some good, some not. It lasts for time. the message we have is talking about the souls of men and women, and the results are eternal. I think too often we play at our task while those who really don't care about Christianity work in deadly earnest. I think it was Charles Swindoll that wrote in one of his books, I think it was Stress Fractures, or a little book called Demonism. It was one or the other. It was way back, I read it. But he talked about when two fighters get into a ring and one thinks it's a photo shoot and one thinks it's an actual boxing match. He says, who's going to win that? And he indicates the one who steps in playing the game is going to be nicknamed Canvasback Jack, because he's always going to be on his back on the canvas looking up, because the other one's going to knock him out. And I'm afraid too many times we have Christians, at least in North America. I understand this is being shown outside of North America. You may already know more about what I'm talking about than we do. But I think too many times we're posturing, how can we blend in? How can we know we're going to heaven without really getting whacked for it? This church that I work at for the last 24 years, we've taken stands that socially have us looking like pariah to some people. And I can't tell you how many times I've been out speaking, because I do quite a little bit of conference speaking, and have people say something like, I just want you to know we're praying for you guys in the church. Glad for the stands you guys take. We just don't want to go through what you're going through. So I thank them for their prayer support. Really, that's quite cowardly, to be real honest. If it's the right thing to do, then stand. But it's hard, again, to give away what you don't have. So question number one, why should Christians or individual churches, congregations care about the subject of discipleship? It's commanded. We'll work through that in the first lesson. Discipleship is not a suggestion. It's an imperative. And the 3 verses we'll look at this morning, or at least 3, are all written as imperatives. Imperatives in Koine Greek are the same things as imperatives in English. They're commands. So why should we be about it? The one that we worship as God and Savior commanded. We make disciples. If we're not making disciples, we're being disobedient. Number 2, what is the difference between a Christian soldier and a religious spectator? One sits in the stands and critiques everybody else. I still think of D.L. Moody when he was being chastised by some of the Christians across the pond because his English was not very good. He had essentially an 8th grade education. He had a gift of evangelism, but he butchered the English language. At least I'm not old enough to have remembered him, but that's what you read about him. And when he was being chastised by some folks on the other side of the pond about how he shared the gospel, he said he would continue to share the gospel the way he did rather than the way they don't. And I like that. I like that suggestion. When people are critics, they've got their little clipboard. They know it all. You just can't get them out of the stands to do anything on the field. They may love Jesus and will be brethren for eternity, so you can't call them worthless. But you can say, as far as the work that they're doing on planet Earth and helping populate heaven and depopulating hell, they're not doing too much other than critiquing the people that are already actually involved in the work. So I see a big difference between people who will get on the field and work versus the ones who want to sit in the stands and critique. I have great respect for one. I don't have a lot of respect for the other. 3, what's the purpose of a discipleship meeting, a Bible study, and a fellowship meeting? Here's what I'm after on this. I'm going to bring Tigger in. I'm sorry if that's rude, but Tigger's got my coffee, and I don't become a Christian until 11 o'clock. So I don't know what you're going to get between now and 11, but Tigger with the coffee will help. I'm asked sometimes when I'm speaking at different churches, they'll say, can you help us get a discipleship program started? Can you help fine-tune us a little bit, whatever. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. But I'll usually ask, tell me what you do for your discipleship training classes. And a common answer I will get is something like this. Well, we have a group of men or a group of ladies. We go down to McDonald's or some place of choice in the morning before work. We take prayer requests. We pray. Each week we shuffle around who's going to do like a 5-minute devotional, and someone shares a word from the Bible, and then we go to work. And we have great discipleship, and we've been doing this for a couple of years. I will say sincerely, that's not discipleship. That's fellowship. Fellowship, and there's nothing wrong with fellowship. When you're getting together to encourage each other, to pick each other up, to pray for each other. It's wonderful. It's just not discipleship. Discipleship involves training. Discipleship involves giving people material that they can digest and then give away to somebody else. And when I'm getting together in a McDonald's or wherever it is, and we're praying for one another, when that becomes our discipleship program, I will say those are going to be the same people that, given opportunities to share, will think I can't do it. It's not that there isn't a desire. It's I don't know how to do it. No one ever trained me. I've never trained anybody. And consequently, I just feel guilty. I end up looking at opportunities, and inside I'm thinking, I think I should share something, but I might not share it correctly, so I don't want to, hurt somebody or mess them up. So I just remain silent. And then after the opportunity's gone, I'm thinking to myself, I should have done something. Fellowship meetings don't equip you for answering questions. They're basically encouragement. Bible study. I teach a lot of Bible. I'm all for fellowship meetings. I'm all for Bible study meetings. I teach classes regularly here at the church. I teach classes and conferences. When I'm doing something with Bible study, I am delivering content. And if you get the content, that's fine. If you don't get the content, it's no skin off my back. When I do workshops at a seminary, when schools, Bible schools or seminaries ask me to come in, I'm delivering content if that's what they're wanting, a Bible study. And you get the grade determined by the work you do or don't do. But I walk away from it. You don't remember me probably. I don't remember you probably. And we just go on. It was an event. Hopefully through Bible study I become more Christ-like. So there's a great purpose for it. Plus we've been challenged and commanded in 2 Timothy 2:15 to study, to be workmen that don't have to be ashamed. So I'm all for Bible study. But when I have people say to me, well, what we do for our discipleship classes is we're working through 28 books of Acts, or we're working through 28 chapters of Matthew, and we just work verse by verse. That's not discipleship. That's Bible study, and it's wonderful, just like fellowship is wonderful. But there is no intent and there's no purpose from whoever is leading your 28-chapter study of giving you material that's responding to questions and such that people are asking. It's basically giving you content to help enrich your life so that you say, I can become more like Christ. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's not purposefully designed to give material that you can give to somebody else. Discipleship training doesn't happen by accident. And it's more than Bible study, although it includes Bible study. It's more than fellowship, although it includes fellowship. It doesn't train by accident. It's training by design, saying, if you start at A, by the time we're done, you'll be at B or C or D. And we're going to pray and prayerfully purpose to move from here to here. It's not going to be we just share the Bible and it lands wherever it lands, and you get whatever you get. A discipleship trainer, I'm going to contend, sticks with a person until they get it. So if I have agreed to disciple people, I have business people come in and meet with me because they can't make it during other meetings. When we get together, we're walking through a set of designed materials answering specific questions. Sometimes they raise them, sometimes I've anticipated them, but so when they walk out the door, they'll go, if that question comes up, I'm diving in. Instead of saying, I think we went over that question about 4 years ago in our Bible study on the book of Isaiah, but I kind of don't remember because it was 60 chapters ago, and so I'll brush up a little bit and see if I can get something, and then maybe I'll meet again with them, but then I never meet with them. I get more opportunities to share with people sitting at a bus stop, sitting at a ball game, someone that just raises a question at lunch. They're not even planned. They seem spontaneous. They are planned. They're divine appointments. But either I'm equipped and ready to roll, or I look at those opportunities and then feel guilty that I didn't jump in. Discipleship training trains people to jump in. So I want to be a soldier. Back to question 3. I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be in the fight, not watching the fight. Number 4. Why are these distinctions important to remember and often confused? Because most of us haven't been discipled. I wasn't discipled. I didn't have a discipleship trainer. I learned by default. I started developing discipleship material in 1982 when I'd already worked voluntarily, helping with the Young Life, helping with Campus Crusade for Christ. I'd worked volitionally as a youth pastor for 2 years at the first church after Bible school and seminary. It is possible to go to Bible school and seminary and never learn how to disciple somebody. I remember when Lynn Ruark, who was, one of the faculty at Western Seminary back when dinosaurs roamed the land and I was there. Kent's laughing because he remembers. But Lynn asked me after I'd been out of seminary for a couple of years, he said, what are classes that you wish you'd have got that we never gave you? And I said the first one was understanding the difference between discipleship training and evangelism. We worked on evangelism and how to share the gospel, but we never worked on what do you do with a person after they become a Christian. The notion was if they start reading their Bible and praying, they'll be just fine. Well, I've been in churches long enough to know that you can have people that become a Christian, they'll agree to read their Bible and pray, and sometimes they're not just fine. And sometimes the assumption that they will connect the dots is not accurate. That's why you need a Paul who said to the Thessalonians, I gave my very life to them. We give our soul like a mother, nursing her children. It was far more than dumping data, and if you get it, that's fine. If you don't get it, that's okay too. No. I'm with you until you get it. We try it through the front door. If that doesn't work, we go through the back door. Back door doesn't work, let's go through the side door. Side door doesn't work, let's crawl through the window. But I'm not leaving till you get what I've got. And once you've drained me, you can go to somebody else and drain them, and then drain someone else until you go, you know what? God is using me to help others with the things I've already learned. But it's not static. It doesn't stop. I'm always learning. I'm always giving away what I've learned. Why is it important? We don't know how to do it because most of us were never discipled. I've had people tell me that in the NFL I worked 21 full seasons and 2 part seasons. Some of you may know that, some of you may not, but they go, there's players all over the country now, and that's not an exaggeration, who understand how to do a lot of what I do. And they say, how did that work? And I say, because I took the time by God's grace to train them, not just have a Bible study. I can have Bible studies, and as I said before, I deliver the content, whether they get it or not, it's on them. I'm not satisfied with that. I want you to be able to do what I can do. That's the command in making disciples. It's not teach Bible studies, it's make disciples. What's the difference between discipling by design and discipling by accident? We probably already said it. Some people are going to make it regardless. I've got people that I've had, God has crossed paths in my life, and I understood all I needed to do was point them a little bit and stay out of their way. They'd have made it whether they were dealing with me or dozens of other people, because the Spirit of God is in them, working in them. They're hungry and they're running. They're easy. But there's other people that they're afraid. They have the heart, but they're just not comfortable because they're afraid. They're not sure where to go. Or maybe it's pride. That can be the other side. I already think that God should have made me a member of the Godhead because I know so much Bible and I've memorized so many verses, by golly. I mean, I'll come in and train all of you. The problem is they don't know anything about training. They know how to memorize Bible verses. Is there anything wrong with memorizing Bible verses? No, it's wonderful. You can't give what you don't have. But discipleship training is more than a navigator meeting where you have people memorizing Bible and you stay in the same group for 10 books, which constitutes how many years, and by the time you're finally finishing the series, you can't remember what was in book 1 because by the time you get to book 10, you forgot book 1. Again, is it sincere? Yes, it is. Can it be helpful? Absolutely it can be helpful because, again, I'm dealing with Scripture. But as far as the purpose of, by design, taking lessons to give them away, it doesn't happen. So call it what it is. It's a great Bible study. Let's take the time we have to get started. Session number 1. You've got your outline in front of you. I'll pull it from the same little book that I started, Disciple Making. I wrote, the New Testament gives us a blueprint for the dynamic ministry of evangelism and discipleship. As obedient followers of Jesus Christ, evangelism and discipleship are not an option. We must obediently participate in the process of systematically sharing the things we have learned with those who will also faithfully carry this message to others. Now, that's just Karl's thing. Karl likes discipleship. That's his thing. No, it's a biblical thing. It's not just, well, by gifting, he has an affinity for this. By gifting, you have an affinity for it. It doesn't have anything to do with gifting and affinity. It has everything to do with obedience to a command. Why do I say that? At least the first two verses we'll check. And let's jump. Let's go to Matthew 28 first. All right, we'll pick up 2 Timothy 2:2. Both of them are imperatives. Both of them are imperatives. It means they're commands. I'm sure that, especially for some of you involved with missions, and I know there's a big contingency involved with missions, Matthew 28:18-20 gets preached a lot in churches as a mandate for going. And, the notion is that if you're serving here, that's fine, but if you're serving somewhere else, that's even better. And usually the focus is on a participle, go. Go, go, and go. And if you're not going, somehow you're less than. And then maybe that's true. Maybe I'm supposed to be somewhere else. Maybe God has designed me for being somewhere else. But sometimes he's designed me to be right here doing what I do. Our value is the same. We just serve in different places. Is God leading and directing? That's really the key to the situation. Someone is not more or less spiritual depending on where they serve. They're more or less spiritual when they're obedient. Gifts don't determine maturity. Locale doesn't determine maturity. Obedience determines maturity. The Great Commission. Jesus came upon and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Now, here's my job. If I do my job in the time we have, see if I stay halfway as close, this thing on time. I want you to be able to take the verses that we use this morning and not only recognize the verses, but to be able to use them. Remember, discipleship training is not by accident. It's design. So design in my brain is, I want you to know first, is there a biblical basis for making disciples? If there's a biblical basis for it, then throw yourself into it and be obedient to the challenge, to the command. If it's just someone's hobby horse, do you want the carpet to be brown or do you want it to be green? I'm not bleeding over that. Make the carpet whatever color you want. That's a choice, but it's not an imperative. The Great Commission was given an imperative. It's a command. So I want you to understand number one, and 2 Timothy 2:2, we'll look at that for sure. The Matthew 28. If we get time, we'll get the 1 Peter 3. Each one of them imperative, a little bit different aspect of what we're going to try to accomplish. But I want you to understand, yes, there's a biblical basis for this. When I think of making disciples, I think of the Great Commission. Why? Why? You've got a main verb in the Great Commission. Kent will remember this from our classes. I don't know if we had the same teachers, but we were at the same school. Maybe we did. But the main verb, the main action for the Great Commission is make disciples. Mathetes. It's meant to be a student, a learner. The word picture that the Greeks would use for a disciple was a teacher walking in front, a rope over the back of the teacher, the student holds on to the rope, and a good disciple says, I don't let go of the rope. I'll hold on even at the base. Tie a knot in it. If the topography is bumpy, I won't let go. If the topography is smooth, I won't let go. In other words, whether it's smooth sailing or a hard trucking, the good student followed the teacher wherever they went. That was the notion behind it. So it goes beyond convenience, it goes beyond comfort, it goes beyond personality. It's saying, I'm sticking. I am going to follow you until I can do anything you can do. So first you say, what did the word mean? It meant to be a student. It meant to be a learner. Are there people in the Christian faith who rebel against being students and learners? Yes, they do. And yes, there are. Doesn't mean, look at the Corinthian church, the most carnal church we're aware of in the New Testament. Paul addresses them as believers, but he also says, you're carnal, you're worldly. He has a lot of things to say about them. I got the message of come to Jesus. But as far as learning how to be trained so I can train others, that didn't connect, for probably a number of reasons. So are there people that say, I want to be a student of Christ? No, I just want to know I'm going to heaven. Well, that means they're not born again. It doesn't. I'm born again when I have committed my life to Christ. Pisteo. I have transferred my trust from wherever it was to Christ for salvation. We add lots of hoops on top of that. The hoops aren't what makes me born again. It's responding to the message of Christ. But there are some people, again, who all you have to do is stay out of their way. They get the message, they pick up, and they run. They're fun to work with. There are others where it seems like it's just barrier after barrier. And either you stick with them and work through it, or you just let it go. I don't want to learn. See, the assumption is, one of the things, I'll give you a little rabbit trail. One of the things I learned as a pastor, it was a disappointment initially, but it's a good thing I learned it, I suppose. When I was at Bible school, going through seminary, I assumed that everybody that I met in church wanted to grow. When I would get to a church, it's like the millennium was around the corner, because finally, instead of being at the college campus where I got beat up for my faith, not physically, but I was under siege most of the time. It was good. I learned how to fight. I learned that me and Jesus made a majority. But I figured when I finally got to church, now I'm around people that want to learn and want to grow. Man, we're going to lock arms and we're going to march into hell with squirt guns for Jesus, right? And I end up going in there and I find out I've got some people who are just as carnal as the people that were at school. Some of them know all the verbiage. They just don't have anything behind the verbiage. I figured they all want to be soldiers out on the field, and some of them are very happy being spectators with their clipboards critiquing everybody else. They don't have any intention of taking the shots. I don't want to get hurt for Jesus. I just want to go to heaven. So one of the things I understand in making disciples is that notion, you know what? It's a choice, and it goes beyond saying, will I respond to Jesus, and will I occasionally read a Bible or occasionally pray? Again, I said when we started, you can't give what you don't have. You can't share what you don't know. If you want to be useful sharing something, you've got to get the input somewhere. So first, I understand. Making disciples, it's a command. That is the main emphasis of the Great Commission, or the Great Command. Call it what you want. It assumes we understand what it means to be a disciple, a learner, a student. How do I remember what that verse is about? I put it with two, in triads. Remember, I want something that you can use, you can give away. So if somebody says to me, how do you remember the content or the basic emphasis of the Great Commission in the context of making disciples? I say, well, first I want someone to understand what? It's a command. It's not just an idea. It's not just a suggestion. It's an imperative. It means that I want to train people to be students, to be learners who can give away what I can give away. So that's going to go beyond just dumping data. But I put it in triads. First, I look at the relationship of the verses, 18 to 19 to 20. It's a triad, right? 3 verses, 18, 19, 20. So I think to myself, how do I remember what's in that Great Commission? I say, well, first, 18, what's it say? Jesus says, how much authority is his and where? All authority is given to me where? In heaven and on earth. In other words, I would write, I'm the boss with verse 18. That's what Jesus was stating. I'm the boss. There's nobody in heaven or on earth that has more authority than me. Why is that important? Because if the boss gives me a job, I'm sticking on that job until the boss changes his mind. One of the things I learned early, being in church, and I love the church. If I say anything that sounds critical of the church, I've been working in churches since 1977. If I didn't believe in the church, I would not still be here, right? Just wrinkles and all. There's blessing and there's discouragement. There's lots of things. But one of the things I learned early, especially as a youth pastor, because what I didn't know going into church as a youth pastor was a euphemism for somebody who's almost a pastor. And they're going to work there until they finally become a senior pastor, which means they're a real pastor. Now, I'm being sarcastic if some of you I don't believe that. I believe there are some people called to work with that age, and if they can die doing that, work a lifetime, that's great. But I learned that at least some of the people view youth pastors as almost a pastor, and so you can be focused on working. In my case, I had junior high school and college. I didn't work with the junior hires because I thought they were almost human. I trained somebody to work with them because I just didn't connect with junior hires. But I loved the high school and the college age, and we had a blast. But But I would have people, sometimes other staff, as I'm walking through saying, Karl, I know we hired you to work with youth, but we need someone to work with the ladies. Can you imagine me being over women's ministry? That's actually happened. I mean, makes no sense. Or, by the way, Karl, we need you to start this program or that program. I would do it because I figured as a pastor and someone's further up the food chain than I am, I'm responsible to do that. I finally one day walked into one of my senior pastors and I said, why are you killing me? And he says, what do you mean, why are you killing me? And I said, well, here was the job I came in to do, and I am now going this way and this way and this way and this way. And he said, well, why are you doing that? I said, because people up the food chain told me to do that. I figured I was supposed to. He said, I'm the boss. I said, yeah? He said, we agreed to a job description. I said, yes, we did, and I feel like I don't have time to do what we agreed to. He said, until I change my mind on the job, just tell people no. You're not responsible to pick up the jobs they don't want to do, because the truth was, they found me to be very young, lots of energy, and I would take on the jobs they didn't want to do. But what it did was it pulled me away from the job that I had been hired to do. So when the big boss finally says to me, next time someone comes up to you and redirects you, say, go talk to Hutch. Go talk to Ed. Go talk to Dr. J. Go talk to the boss. When they change their mind, I'll change my mind. Until then, I'm on task. So when Jesus says in the 18, all authority is given to me in heaven and earth, he's saying, I'm the boss. 19, go therefore and what? Make disciples. Here's the job. So 18 tells me he's the boss. He's got the juice to tell me what to do. 19 says, here's the job to accomplish. And he says, make disciples. Make students, make learners who can give away what you have given them. It goes beyond saying, I lead them to Jesus. I love evangelism. The poor people that get stuck with me on airplanes and jets and stuff, man, I would pray before I get on, Lord, is it a divine appointment? If they fall asleep, I go, okay, I get to read, whatever I want to do. If they look at me and, conversations start, okay, here we go. Let's go fishing, baby. And they're going to be stuck as long as that trip is until they either get saved or they tell me to shut up, right? But in other words, you're looking for opportunity. You're looking for opportunity to be involved in people's lives. So you go, okay, why would I say that? Why would I do that? Well, the big boss, verse 18, said, here's the job. Make disciples. And then 20, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. In other words, Karl, you're not alone. It's fun to play the martyr role. Now, there are people in this country, you look at Coptic Christians getting their heads lifted, you go, they actually are martyrs. I'm talking about people who think they're playing the role of a martyr, emotional games. Oh, it's just me, and there's no one else around here that wants to follow Jesus like I do, and Jesus, this is so hard. And it's like, get off your, come on, quit playing games. Remember Elijah? Kills 450 prophets of Baal, and then Jezebel says, all right, I'm going to get you for what you did. He takes off running. 26 miles later, it's like, okay, God, I'm the last one left. Just go ahead and kill me. God doesn't say you're right. He says, I've got 7,000 just like you don't even know about. It's like he's saying, shut up and get up. Let's go. Get on with work. Because see, the truth is, Jesus makes a promise in 20. I'm with you always. You're never alone. I feel so alone. That's a lie. You're not. Not a lie that you may feel alone, but it's a lie for believing that's true. So someone says, how do you remember the Great Commission? I go, one is through a triad. It's just the relation of verse 18 to 19 to 20. What am I saying? 18, Jesus says, I'm the boss. 19, he says, here's the job. 20, he says, you're never alone, so don't play the victim. Don't play the role of the victim. When a Christian walks up to someone and says, I know you really don't want to hear what I have to say because, gosh, everybody makes fun of our message and they think we're bigots and we're racists and we're this and we're that because, we're offensive, but you kind of want to hear my message, who's going to say yes? I mean, you've apologized so much before. He didn't tell you to apologize for your message. Well, Karl, you have to win the right to share your message. No, Jesus already died for that right. Jesus died to give you the right to share a message of hope. So, well, how many years do I have to know someone before I've earned the right to speak to them? See, I don't buy that. Jesus paid for that right. Why? He's the boss. He died. What's the job he gave me? Make disciples. How long does he expect me to do it? As long as I'm breathing. What about when I feel alone? Then I remember I'm not. What about when people make a big deal out of you and say you're doing a good thing? Say thank you. What about when people say, are you out of your mind standing for Jesus? Just say, I try to keep an eternal perspective because all of us are going to bow before him one day. For one, you're going to meet him as the Lamb, your friend. For one, you're going to meet him as your judge. I'd rather meet him as the friend. So what am I saying? When I walk through first, is this just Karl's thing? I would say, no, it's a biblical thing. The Great Commission says, make disciples. That's the job. And I remember that as a triad. That's simple. That's what I wanted. You could share that with somebody. What's the second triad? I said, I remember the Great Commission through triads. Well, there are three participles. Participles are modifiers. They're helpers. They help me understand the main action, have a better read on the main action of the main verb, which is what? Make disciples. That's why I said when I listen, I worked at Fourth Memorial Church for 10 years that was my first full-time job as a youth pastor after volunteering so much time. Every year we had a missions conference, and they prided themselves, and they may still, I don't know, I haven't been in contact with them in a long time, but the sun never sets on our ministry. That was one of their sayings. And every year they would have 52, I remember, it may have gone up or down a little bit, 52 missionaries we support, and the sun never goes down on our ministry. And every year missionaries would come in, because every 4 years then, I don't know how it works now, but every 4 years they would get a fertile, they'd come in and we'd have a big conference. And inevitably somebody would get up and say, go, go, and go, and the job is to go, and go, and go, and don't forget you're supposed to go. Now, I'm not going to publicly attack. I didn't. I would just smile, take notes, breathe, and tell people, yes, we've got a job to make disciples, and part of that job is going. Why? Participles help, but they're not the main action. What does that mean? The command, the imperative is make disciples. Train students, train learners who will follow you. They'll hold on to the rope until they can do anything you can do. They're prepared to answer the questions that are thrown in their face. They're prepared to avoid the landmines that some people purposely put out there. Sometimes it's natural people that are just evil. Sometimes it's demonic spirits, it's supernatural. But there are landmines out there. It's learning how to navigate those things. So I said, remember, the student, the learner. That's why I say it's not by accident. I say, okay, participle number one. As you're going, it's a participle. As you're going, your job is to make disciples. Remember, the participles point you back to the main action. So I said we've got one triad, what? The relationship of the verses. 18 to 19 to 20. I'm the boss, here's the job, and I'm always with you. The second triad, go. As you're going, make disciples. When I hear people say to me, I commented on an article I wrote just a few days ago, when it's, I'll show people my Christianity by my works. I still don't believe that works. I think it sounds very pious, especially for Christians who have been scared out of promoting Christ because they want the applause of people rather than the applause of God Almighty. What do I mean? Oh, you don't want to be pushy. You don't want to, you don't want to make people have to get into this Jesus stuff. Don't you know how it's so? Just work and work and work, and by your work, people will recognize you're a Christian, and then they'll fall in love with Jesus too. No, they fall in love with the worker because they'll say, boy, I wish I had her personality. I sure wish I had his talents because look how talented he is. See, the work doesn't get connected with Christ. And so the one that gets praised is the person. I'm not here as a person to be praised. I'm here to point people to Christ. As you're going, it's active. In other words, as you're going, it's not begging, making people beg to come talk to me. If you are found worthy, if I find you worthy, then you grovel and come up to me, and maybe I'll share, if you come into my office, a few pearls with you. That may work in some Eastern religions. Show yourself worthy, and maybe I'll spend time with you. The action in that sense is all upon the one groveling, trying to demonstrate they're worthy. Jesus' command, his imperative was, as you are going. Make disciples means I'm looking for opportunities to share. I wear jewelry. I've got 3 Super Bowl rings from my time with the, I got one of them on now. I don't wear that because I care about it. I mean, I'm glad to have it. It was fun, to get it, but it's going to burn. I use jewelry. I've got a lion that I wear. And you don't know how many times I'm asked, oh, are you a Leo? And I'll say, that's the wrong lion. And they'll go, what do you mean? I go, this for me is the lion from the tribe of Judah in Revelation 5:5. They'll go, who's that? I'll go, that's Jesus. He's returning to rule as a lion. They'll go, what are you talking about? I'm going, bing, I just hooked you. They'll say, you're too old and too fat to have a ring. I know you're not a player. How'd you get that? I go, I'm a chaplain for the team, which I was for 1 or 2 decades. I'll have people more than you would guess go, what's a chaplain? You want to talk about an indictment on where we are as a culture. There are more people that don't even know what a chaplain is than do. It used to be they go, well, that's a preacher, a teacher, whatever. I'll go, what's a chaplain? I don't even know. And I'll say, well, I teach Bible to the players and coaches and staff. And I'd have people say, you're putting me on. You're kidding me. All players read the Bible? Oh, yeah, some of them are very, very conversant. Well, what do you teach them? Bingo, baby, I just hooked them again. They're asking me, what do you teach them, right? In other words, I'm looking for opportunity to give away what I've been given rather than make people beg me to see if I'm willing to spend time with them. A discipler looks for opportunity. I can remember how many times I had teachers. I am a teacher, so I'm not opposed to teachers. But I can remember how many times I had teachers where there would be a sign on their door and it'd basically say, I'm here for a few hours, 2 days a week. Make an appointment if you want to see me. If you don't make an appointment, the door's closed. Stay out. That's not a discipler. That's someone that dumps content. Do we need people like that? Yes, they're gifted to do that. But don't mistake dumping content with sharing your life with somebody. As you're going, discipler, it's your job to what? Make disciples. Second part is simple. As you are baptizing, baptizo, it was a Greek word that meant, the etymology was to dip or to identify, to be identified with. In other words, as you're baptizing, remember your job is to make disciples. My job is not to say how many baptisms I performed in a month, because if I have 15, that makes me a great pastor. If I have 2, that means I'm a horrible pastor. So let's, kind of use baptisms as a notch for maturity. I was baptized as a non-Christian. In 5th grade, my mom said, would you be baptized? I said, why? She said, because I'd like you to be baptized. I said, okay. So I went. When we finished, my mom said, what did the pastor talk to you about? I said, baseball. She said, well, I remember the Jesus part. I said, what Jesus part? We talked about baseball. That was a church where I asked later when I went back after my first, I said, who's Jesus? A nice guy. Any more than that? No, he's a nice guy. What's the Bible? Good book. Good parts, bad parts. Anything about inspired? Are you kidding? It was written by men. In other words, when you go to a non-Christian pastor and have him baptize you, why he go to that church? Why are they going to talk to you about Jesus? They're not. So in other words, baptism isn't the focus. The focus was the identification. You want another word picture? The word picture Greeks would use for baptizo was you take a white piece of cloth, you dip it in a purple vat of dye, and that piece of cloth will forever be identified as what? Purple. Why? It has a new identity. It's no longer the white piece of cloth it was. It's now a purple piece of cloth. In relation to Great Commission, Jesus was telling them there's going to be a commitment. There's going to be a change in identification. People used to know you as Simon the fisherman. They're now going to know you. You're purple cloth. You're the disciple of Christ. You go wherever he goes. So again, it's not on you literally baptize them. And yes, I believe in baptism. I baptize people. If you haven't been baptized, you're a believer, get baptized. It doesn't save you. It's obedience. It's obedience to a command for to be baptized. Why? It's a public declaration of something that changed in my life internally. That's biblical. The other isn't. But the picture behind it in relationship to discipleship was, just like as you're going, it's action-oriented. Don't make people beg. As you're baptizing, there's supposed to be a change in identification. That's why when someone says, if I receive Jesus, I'm his disciple. No, not necessarily. Think of John chapter 6. As long as they are eating fish and chips, man, we love Jesus. He's great. And when he starts talking about what it means to follow him, it says they grumble to the point that he finally says to the 6, are you guys going too? Are you guys leaving? No, you're the only one with the words of life. So what am I saying? It was possible to say yes to Jesus, but go, I don't have an interest in being trained. I just want to go to heaven. Our job is to not make followers of Jesus who make sure they've got fire insurance, but they don't care about learning how to be trained to be a soldier. Our job is to make disciples. Students, learners that say, I don't let go. You can't shake me off. Remember our first triad? I'm the boss. Here's the job, and I'm always with you, so don't play the game of the victim. What's my second triad? Go. It's on your back, discipler. You're looking for opportunities. If people don't bite, that's fine. But I'm at least throwing out the line, just like with evangelism. What second thing I understand? As you are baptizing, there's going to be a shift in identification. That means I'm in with Jesus. I'm all in. When it's convenient, I'm in. When it's not convenient, I'm still in. And then thirdly, as you're teaching, make disciples. Those are your three participles. As you're going, the job, make disciples. As you're baptizing, job is to make disciples. And as you're teaching, the job is to make disciples. How do you teach what you don't know? How do you give away what you don't have? How do you share what you've never learned? You can't do it. So if I want to be able to teach, then I've got to be taught. And as I learn, my job is not just to say, again, I don't know how much training all of you had. I remember when we spent weeks talking about lapsarianism in seminary, supralapsarianism, infralapsarian. There are three different types of lapsarian. I've been in the church since 1977, and I have never once had anybody in the church ask me about my opinion on lapsarianism. They think that, well, God, is it a disease? I mean, animal, mineral, vegetable? I mean, I don't even know what you're talking about. In other words, we spend all kinds of time debating stuff back and forth. Nothing wrong with understanding something, but folks, that's not the question people are asking. Do I understand concepts behind it? Can I share them? See, as I'm learning, I'm trying to digest it so I can put it in a package that someone else goes, I know what you're talking about, and I can share that with someone else. If I try and say, listen, if you don't have a doctorate, you can't train people. I haven't helped somebody, I've hurt somebody. There's nothing in the text that says you have to have an earned doctorate to be a discipler. There's nothing that says you have to be a pastor, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. There's all kinds of disciples. I just want to be able, I've learned something well enough, I can hand it off. That's the job, folks. How do I know that? Because I can't teach what I haven't been taught. And one of the participles says, as you're teaching, don't forget your job is to make disciples. Learn it, but put it in a package someone can go, I'm with you. I get it. I'll do the job with you. So when someone says, two triads help me walk through the notion of make disciples, I can do that. What do I remember? First, relation of verses. It's a triad, but it's easy to walk through. What's 18 essentially say? I'm the boss. What's 19 essentially say? Here's the job. What does 20 eventually say? Don't play the role of the victim. I'm with you always. That's Jesus. If the boss is for you, it doesn't matter who's against you. That's what Paul said in Romans 8:31, right? If God's for you, it doesn't matter who's against you. And that's the truth. Well, what if they kill me? Then I'll be with Jesus. In other words, he says to the Philippians, to go or to stay. One seems better, one seems more necessary, but he's going to win either way. He's going to be obedient to Christ. What's the second triad that helps me walk through that the Great Commission or Great Command? It's those participles. How do I make disciples? Well, part of the job, because remember, the participles help modify. They help me understand the main action, the main verb. Well, part of making disciples is going. Are you looking for opportunity? You're supposed to. Are you baptizing? Are you remembering there's a change in identification? It's not training people to blend in. It's training people to be salt. That stands out. Training people to be light. That stands out. Training people to be stars in a crooked and perverted generation, says Paul in Philippians 1. That stands out. People that make an art form out of blending in and saying how godly I am, that's shameful. That's shameful. So I say, what am I doing? Well, I'm going. I'm looking for opportunity. I'm baptizing. There's an identification. It's going to cost you something. In one sense, the gospel costs you nothing. It's a free gift given by grace. In the other sense, it costs you everything. Galatians 2:20 says you gave your life to Christ. What he does with it, it's up to him. Romans 12:1 and 2 says the same kind of thing. Ephesians chapter 4:22 through 24 says, I've got a job. I want to be more like Christ, less like me. Put off the old man by putting on the new, that makes me more like Christ. And then thirdly, what do I remember? as you're teaching? Are you learning so you can show people how smart you are? Are you learning so you can brag about how many verses you've memorized? Or are you learning so you can hand it off to somebody else and give them the confidence that Christ lives in you? The same God that lives in me lives in you. And if he can use me, he can use you. And we may be gifted different, so we may have different jobs, but the resource is the same, the Spirit of God who lives in. Does he empower? Yes, he does. So don't whine about your gifting. Don't whine about your personality. Don't whine about, I wish I was more like Kent. I don't want to be like Kent. I don't want to be like Keith. I mean, I do to the degree that they follow Jesus. I want to be the best Karl that God wanted Karl to be. Just like I want Keith and Kent to be the best Keith and best Kent. Hey, that's great. In this room, we got Karl, Kent, and Keith. 3 Ks. How about, that could be taken the wrong way. Think of it as strikeouts, Randy Johnson pitching. All right, that'd be there's your 3 Ks. Randy, or the King now, I guess. Johnson's my era. The King is somebody else's. But you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying you learn so you can share what you learn. You don't learn to puff yourself up. That's a waste of time. No one cares. In 5th grade, I won the Bible Bowl championship. That was 40 years ago. What you been doing the last 40 years? No one cares about what you did in 5th grade. I care about what am I doing day to day. Am I remembering the boss? Am I remembering the job he gave me? Am I being obedient, going, you know what, don't approach it with apology. Don't play the victim. I'm victor because of Christ. Well, what's involved? Training people. Oh, how do I know that? That's what the word meant, making disciples, making students. What's another way I can remember that in the Great Commission? I go, well, just remember part of it involves going. You're looking for opportunity. Part of it involves baptizing. It means there's a change in identification. And part of it means teaching. I've learned something. I've mastered something so I can hand it off. Can you work with that? If you can, I did my job. If you can't, I failed you. God love you. God bless you. Enjoy your 30 minutes.